We're here today building some next-gen rolling ebb and flow benches, and we're going to go over some procedures. Let's get to it. Let's start with some layout. And as we walk around the room, we want to get our full dimensions, both cross and lengthwise. Once we have those dimensions, it's going to be the first part of your process, and that's what's going to be discussed with next-gen in order to get you the best fulfillment in your room. Ideally, our layout is going to maximize the space of the room, but also maximize our aisle width and light usage. What we want to do is go ahead and start by assembling some of your legs, uppers and roll bars, and then what we've done here is we've laid out some of our side rails. That way we can get an idea of how this is going to fit into the room. It's good to be able to visualize it and not just have it on paper. The aisle spacing at your wall may vary depending on your county or any sort of code, and that needs to be checked before installation. This particular layout that we're doing, we're going to have a 30-inch aisleway. Once we've set our end legs, we can come in and either center the layout, meaning that everything is equally spaced as this one's laid out right now. 26.5-foot room, 4 5-foot benches gives us a 28-inch spacing on our aisle. With our bench fully extended either direction, we have 18 inches of spread, which is going to allow us a 10-inch space in between our next aisle and our table at full extension. In this particular layout, obviously, we have certain parameters that we're going to work around with, and we're going to create an evenly spaced room. If your application is where you're trying to get the most coverage possible, we can do what we call a wall crowded setup, where we begin with the first leg 18 inches off the wall. After that, our next bench is going to be the same. It's going to be 18 inches spread. And so we bring that to 18. That allows our benches to roll completely together to where they're touching wall to bench to bench. As you can see in this setup, we can almost get a fifth bench. This would only allow us 14.5 inches at the far end. One of the main things you have to keep in consideration, though, is with a narrow aisleway comes more difficult workspace. By maximizing this area as much as you can to your room's dimensions is ideal. So what we've done is we've started our layout now. We've already gone over how we're going to lay the room out. What we've done is we've started with one chalk line. This one chalk line is going to tell us where our first leg starts off the wall. We're going to go over that spacing in the next round. But what we want to do is we want to start with this line so that as we're doing our row spacing, we can keep it nice and consistent. And this is also going to give us our drill marks. So what we started by doing is measuring off the wall, deciding where our first leg is going to start. Like I said, we'll go over that next. That way, we maintain our straight line as we measure down to get all our legs. That way, we're not getting inaccurate measurements. Now that we want to start laying out our drill holes, what we're going to do is take our sheet and our plans, came with the kit. What these are going to do is give us our layout dimensions. We want to make sure that we're working with hole centers and not bench edges. So what we want to measure is not necessarily the edge of the bench here, but once we put our lower leg in, where our bolt is actually going to go, which is going to be right in the center of this leg. For reference, it's 1.25 inches from this edge to the bolt center. Our first measurement in this particular layout, and yours will vary, is 33.25 inches. What that gives us is our 32 inches off of the wall, plus our 1.25 inches for our bolt space. Our second measurement is going to be a consistent measurement because it's our leg spacing, this case, a 5-foot bench. 5-foot bench, leg spacing, hole center to hole center is 41.5 inches. That's going to be our next mark. Aisle spacing on this project is 27 inches. We also have to include our 1.25 inches on each side, so we're going to measure at 29.5 inches for our aisle spacing. And to complete this half of the room, it's going to be the 40.5 inches again for our bench space. Since I've measured from one half of the room, what I want to do is I want to start from the other half of the room. This allows me to do is not have a tape stretched out 30 feet causing inconsistencies or inaccuracies. It also lets me check my work. So what I'm going to do is measure the same spacing all the way out. I'm going to measure to make sure my room center comes up where it's supposed to in between my bench rows. Now that we've reached the mark at our second bench from the wall and our second bench from the other wall, now what we can do is check to make sure that our aisle spacing matches what we expect. Here we are at 28 inches, which is exactly what we wanted.